everyone, and welcome to TechnAct. This is a space where, together with guests, researchers, and activists, we discuss different subjects in relation to social movements, gender, sexualities, and digital technologies. As always, my name is Nadia.
And my name is Onur.
And actually, today we have a new member in our podcast team. Her name is Sama. Welcome, Sama. We're very happy that you join us today in our project.
Hello, everyone. My name is Khosravi Ooryad, and I'm so glad to be a new member of the TechnAct podcast. I have a background in gender studies, and currently I am a PhD student at the Department of Cultural Sciences at the University of Gothenburg, conducting research also as part of a Marie Curie project called NetHate. I'm excited to join the department and the TechnAct team, and looking forward to our discussions here in the podcast series. So today we are joined by Zeynab, who is a bisexual activist and scholar based in the UK. Zeynab has a long trajectory of feminist and LGBTQI plus activism, and we are so excited to have them today with us.
Yes, welcome, Zeynab. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I want to ask, first of all, how are you doing?
Hi, thanks for inviting me. I'm so excited to be in this podcast and to talk about this issue today with you. Actually, I feel quite well today because after a long time we have sun again in Manchester,
Great.
which is really a moment to celebrate here. And I'm also happy to be here with you.
Nice. It's so nice that you have it because we still don't have that in Gothenburg. So at least you have it now.
Yeah, actually, here in Gothenburg, it's a bit rainy. Oh,
Yeah.
Yesterday it rained, and also the day before yesterday. So it's very good that there it's better than here.
We are rooting for the summer.
Yeah, exactly. And thank you again. And I just wanted to start by asking you, can you just tell us a bit about yourself generally, and also maybe just tell us a bit about what do you find interesting in research and activism, maybe in parallel, but also separately.
Well, as you said, my name is Zeynab Peyghambarzadeh, and I'm currently a Ph.D. student at the University of Huddersfield in the UK. And I have started activism long time ago when I was living in Iran. And the reason that I became interested in academia was to be a better activist, a more informed activist. So I grew up with this idea of I wanna be an adult who changed the world. And I have never really had a clear image of what I want to do to earn money in my life, or how I wanna manage my life, but I always knew that I want to be an activist, and that was the only option for me. Growing up in a political family and also in a very political atmosphere. At the time, there was different social movements going on in Iran, and everyone was talking about change. Social change was very important for me. But when I was studying sociology in Iran, I became more and more interested in gender issues. And I became more involved in feminist movement in Iran. And then I moved to Sweden, to Lund, to do my master in social studies of gender. And 4 years ago, I moved to the UK to do my PhD here. But when I was in Sweden, I also started to be more active in LGBT movement. And more specifically, I started to do cyber activism in LGBT issues for the Persian-speaking communities. And that was how I became interested in doing research about bisexuality.
Thank you. Thank you. That was very nice. So in terms of your, I mean, you have talked a little bit of the different stages or the different places where you have been, but can you tell us just a little bit of I mean, we would love to know your trajectory as of our activist work. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So in 2014, I started an organization together with my friend and colleague Sudevrad, which is called Spectrum, and we are a queer feminist organization. And we currently run different websites and social media platforms focusing on gender and sexuality, everything from a queer feminist point of view and also from an intersectional point of view. And we are also in contact with different social movements in the region in Europe and also internationally around the world. And also, of course, we are in contact with people and activist groups who are in Iran. But I would say that in the same way that people did not choose to do everything online after pandemic, we also did not choose to focus on cyber activism. Like as diaspora group, we had to do it. And yeah, like I think during the past 6 years, yeah, most of my work has been always online. And yeah, I'm kind of, it's really nice, not nice to say that, but after pandemic, I feel more normal.
What do you mean?
Sorry about that.
What do you mean, like working remotely or doing things online?
Yeah, that's part of it, but also living online, because it's not that we only work online or socialize online, we live online in different levels. And that has been something which has been always weird and unacceptable. And also, it used to be seen as our own personal choices instead of the only option that we have. But also nowadays, everyone has to familiarize themselves with online technologies and also to spend time online. So like it's easier for us to communicate with people. And yeah, like I would say that my life has become kind of easier in some ways. Yeah, I understand that it has been a disaster for everyone around the world, but I can appreciate some aspect of it, unfortunately.
No, totally. I understand, of course. Being, for example, my partner right now, it's in Colombia, so our only chance to actually spend time together is online. So thank you, technology, for for helping us on doing at least that, and we don't need to, write letters to arrive, I don't know, in a month or something. Now it's just very easy to, connect. So yeah, I agree that there are some silver linings in the situation.
And yeah, from here, actually, I would like to open up a bit about your LGBTQI plus activism, because you are especially focusing on bisexual visibility, bi plus activism. So can you tell us a little bit about your bi plus activism, and are there any, for example, transnational initiatives that you are part of? We would love to hear.
Well, I became interested in bi activism after I met a German bi activist, and after she introduced me to a book which was about stories of by women in US in 90s. And that was the first time that I could really relate to a story about LGBT people. And then also that was the time that I was living in Sweden, and I had more space to take my sexual orientation seriously. And yeah, and also I felt more safe to talk about my sexual orientation, like a lot of other Iranians who only talk about their sexual orientation openly with their own name after leaving Iran. And then I realized that my story is not really communicable and tellable in especially in Persian speaking communities because of the mononormative understanding of sexual orientation in the binary of gay lesbian versus heterosexuality. And I also invited people to share their stories as we created an online platform for talking about non-monosexuality in Persian. But I realized that people don't feel safe to do that. And one of the reasons was that many of them were asylum seeker or used to be asylum seeker based on their sexual orientation. And I realized, yeah, that people only find this space to talk about their sexual orientation in relation to asylum. And I started looking for studies about bisexual asylum seekers, and I realized that there is almost no research about it, and if there is anything, it's based on uh, asylum cases. No one has ever done any field work about it. And then gradually I became interested in research about bisexual asylum seekers, and also in the way that, in the process that make talking about bisexuality and non-monosexual sexual orientation impossible in Persian-speaking communities. But in this process, I have been in contact with different activists and organizations around the world. When I started this activism, I used to live in the south part of Sweden, and there it was really hard to talk about bisexuality. And I was told that Sweden used to be more active about it in 2000, 2001, but then as queer become more and more a common terminologies, people started erasing bisexuality and uh, not considering bisexual people queer enough. But also at that time, there was this growing bi movement in the north, in Umeå, and also in center in Stockholm. But the only bi activists that I was in contact with them at that time were activists in Copenhagen. And then also I had chance to meet by activists from all around Europe when I attended Eurobicon in 2016. And then I went to different regional and international conferences for LGBT issues. And I always felt very welcomed in bi communities when I wanted to raise the issue of bisexual asylum seekers, but I found it very hard to talk about it among LGBT activists, and even harder to talk about it among LGBT asylum activists. So I always felt really not welcomed and safe in general LGBT platforms. While, yeah, of course, I felt more safe in bi communities, but also I still felt an outsider as an immigrant and person of color, of course. So different platforms have been helpful to me to understand different aspects of my intersectional experiences. But also I have been trying very hard to uh, build a space that I feel connected and respected and welcome. And I think that's not an easy task for many of us. But yeah, by movement has been very helpful to me. It has been kind of invisible in the past, but it has become more and more visible in the recent years. And yeah, I think I have been quite lucky to be able to start by activism at a time that bisexuality is becoming again an important issue to address.
Yeah, you touched upon very important points, and one of the things I got from there was about also the invisibility of bisexual asylum seekers. And you are a researcher, you're a PhD student, and we know you are also researching about your research focus is on asylum seeker experiences from especially bi plus people's experiences. Can you a bit open up about your research also?
Well, I focused on Persian stories of sexual orientation. And in order to collect those stories, I went to Turkey, where a lot of researchers and journalists also go to collect the stories, because that's the most common place that Iranian LGBT asylum seekers have access there to seek asylum, and also where they are willing to share their stories. And also, as part of the community, I had connections there, and I knew people there, but still it was really hard to find bi asylum seekers or people who identify as bi and have had experience of seeking asylum. Uh, because generally people believe that their chances of being granted asylum may decrease if they come out as bisexual in the asylum process, which can be not true if you only refer to legal documents, like in different international documents, for example, UNHCR documents. Bisexuals have been considered, and biphobia has been even mentioned clearly, and it has been clearly addressed that bisexuals are also supposed to be protected because of their sexual orientation. But in practice, this is not what happens. In practice, case officers have their own assumptions and their own by negative ideas. Activists who are supposed to support asylum seekers also have internalized those ideas. Other asylum seekers who are important in this process can also be biphobic. And in the context of Turkey, it is very important to be accepted by the community, because asylum seekers in Turkey are stateless people, because Turkey is a transitory country, and they don't receive any support from any international organization or from the Turkish government. There are limited resources, but these are charity resources. So they are they don't receive support because it's their right, but they may receive support if different organizations accept them and consider them people in need of support, people who deserve to be safe. So in this context, asylum seekers have to work in a country that they need work permit, but it's really hard to get that work permit. So they have to work with no permit and be always at the danger of being deported because of doing what is considered illegal. So it is a very harsh situation. And sometimes people even don't know the language of the country. And most of them have been, most of them don't really receive any support from their families because families don't accept their sexual orientation and gender identity. So we are talking about people who don't have any support and they have to be rely on the community and the community doesn't accept them. So they have to try to tell their story in a way that is acceptable for different people who are in the asylum process. They are involved in the asylum process in different levels. So asylum process is a process of telling and retelling your story several times. It's not that you only tell your story to a case officer. That's, of course, the most important storytelling occasion, but that's not the only one, especially in the case of Turkey, that there is the process of resettlement as well, and there are other interviews in that level. And sometimes you need support from charities and organizations in the resettlement country, like in the case of Canada. And the situation for Iranian asylum seeker has become harder in the past few years because the asylum process has become slower because of displacement of Syrian refugees, and also because of travel ban in Turkey, and because of changing in asylum policies in different countries. So people used to come to Turkey to live there for a few months or maximum 2-3 years. And now they have been stuck there for several years. So in this situation, everyone is just trying to find a way to flee from Turkey. And in this context, it doesn't seem to be that logical to come out yourself as bisexual. And that has been the most challenging part of this research for me, to find people and to make them to trust me and share their stories with me, and also to make sure that in this process I'm actually helping the community, not creating harm. And that has been part of my research, the main part of my research. But also to understand the context, I have analyzed the cyberspace and social media platforms. And I have focused mostly on Twitter because that's the place that a lot of Iranian LGBT people feel safe to come out, and also a place that they organize collective action, that they build community and communicate with each other and support each other, and also where they receive a lot of harassment, and also a place that they talk about their differences. So I have found Twitter a good space to understand the stories that we tell in Persian about sexual orientation. And yeah, another challenge has been how to use that information without putting anyone in danger. and also respecting privacy of people, because although we think that people are sharing their information on social media platform publicly, so it's public information, they may not really see it like that. And that's very important to respect people's privacy when we analyze any data from social media.
Yeah, that's right. And you already touched upon a lot of very important issues in your research, and also about the problems of bisexual asylum seekers, for example, in the case of Turkey. And you also talked briefly about the problem of biphobia among that community, but let's just move beyond your framework of research at the moment and just think or kind of expand a little bit about this biphobia within the LGBTQ community and how you kind of address this problem and how do you navigate this problem. But also, I was thinking about one specific occurrence in the Iranian in the Iranian social media platforms that happened recently about this TV show. The host of this TV show who kind of commented very problematic um, expressions and things about the bisexual individuals while kind of welcoming the other LGBTQI community members. So why do you think this problem is getting so big, even within the Iranian diaspora community, and the TV show hosts can kind of say such problematic commentaries? Uh, so what is your take on this? Within the LGBTQ community, it exists, and also beyond that.
Yeah, I think we need to consider that biphobia has a long history, but also like the modern understanding of sexual orientation is something new, and when people started identifying as gay and lesbian, I think that's the time that biphobia has started. So internationally around the world, the idea of being attracted to more than one sex or gender has been very common in different civilizations. We can see it in ancient Greece, in ancient Iran, and I don't know, in different parts of Asia, and I don't know, in different communities in North America. So this has been always kind of considered natural, the attraction to more than one sex or gender. But when we talk about sexual orientation as an identity, that's an identity which has been formed in front of the pathologized understanding of same-sex attraction. And then this idea of being gay and being lesbian, and that idea of that your sexual orientation is what you are, not the act that you do, is something modern and new. And I think that's where we can talk about the time that we can talk about biphobia. And since then, bisexual movement has been active in different countries, and especially since 90s, it has been more visible in different parts of the world. And that's also the time that we can talk about the modern Iranian LGBT movement. Like there has been some sort of gay activism in Iran before the Islamic Revolution in 1979. But if we want to talk about modern organized and structured LGBT movement in Iran, it has started in 90s when Iranian Scandinavian countries started publishing magazines, and also they were in contact with activists in North America. And this biphobic ideas and bi erasure started in that movement from then. But I think part of this biphobic ideas is kind of based on a homonormative understanding of sexual orientation, on this desire to be accepted as normal, good citizens who pay tax and follow the rules and follow family values and are monogamous and don't talk openly about their sex and their sexual desire, and also are productive part of a capitalist system. So this homonormative understanding of sexual orientation find bisexuals troubling, and also blame them for not being accepted by the heterosexual society, and also try to label them with whatever labels that heterosexual society use for gay and lesbians. So calling bisexuals a slut, or people who don't follow rules and are not reliable. These are actually a way for some part of the gay and lesbian community to protect themselves against homophobia, and to find a group to blame. And we can see that very clearly in the Persian-speaking community. And I think a concept that really helps us to understand that issue is the concept of hamjensbaz. And hamjensbaz is someone who is not really attracted to their same sex emotionally and sexually, but someone who want to play with their same sex. And always it's defined as someone who is attracted to more than one sex or gender. So we can clearly say that hamjensbaz is a bisexual slut who doesn't care about the emotion of their same-sex partner, who will cheat on them, who will marry the other sex at the end, and who will benefit from heterosexual norms, and is not really in need of help, and doesn't really face any discrimination based on their sexual orientation. And we can see this very clearly in a context, in a platform like Twitter, where a lot of gay people talk about how hamjensbaz people are using them for their own sexual pleasure, and how they pretend that they are interested in them, and how they use different dating apps to find a same-sex partner only to have sex with them. And we can see also the discussions about it, like how some bisexuals and also some other people question that understanding of sexual orientation, and also how they make fun of it by calling, also creating this concept of dojensbaz, which is someone who is attracted to more than one sex or gender, but they don't really they have sex with more than one sex or gender, but they are not really attracted to them emotionally and sexually. And Yeah, I think Twitter is important for this discussion because I think that's the first platform that has created a space for this discussion about sexual orientation in this level, and so many people have had chance to get involved in this discussion.
Thank you. You have given us a really big scope on to touch upon all these different things. You have mentioned Twitter a couple of times. Is there maybe any other digital platform that you are using for your bioplast activism, or just wondering because I come from informatics, so it's kind of interesting for me to know but other types of digital platforms you might be using besides Twitter, for example.
Yeah, well, like any other user, I have used different platforms, and I have chosen them because they have become popular in a specific period of the time, especially among Iranians. So I used to be more active on Facebook, but then it has become filtered, and a lot of Iranians moved to Telegram, and Telegram was also filtered, and also people then moved to Instagram. And I think Instagram right now is the most common social media platforms among Persian speakers, especially among Iranians, because Afghan Persian speaker users still use Facebook widely because it's not filtered there. And also they use YouTube as well because they have better internet, with better connection speed in Afghanistan compared with Iran. But also people who use different kind of platforms have different understanding of themselves. Like in Persian speaking communities, Twitter users think of themselves as more intellectual users who care about more important issues, and who talks about politics and social issues and theoretical discussions, but also identify themselves in contrast to Instagram users who are defined by Twitter users as not intellectual, not educated, and people who only want to show off about what they have, and follow celebrities. But also we can see all sort of activism in Instagram as well. Like for example, feminist activists are very active in Persian Instagram. But I think the space that these two different platforms provide for their users are kind of different. Instagram is better for blogging, and there is this hierarchy between the blogger and the followers who can only comment, while in Twitter, almost everyone has the same a chance to share their idea. And of course, people who have more followers are seen more than other people, and they bring their social capital from other spaces with themselves to Twitter. So it's not that they build up their identity from their scratch, but at least I can say that in the Persian speaking community, Twitter has provided more space for the most marginalized group of people to be seen and heard. And part of it is that because it's easier to remain anonymous in Twitter compared with other platforms where visual content play a more important role. But I also know that, for example, in English-speaking communities, Tumblr is very important for people who talk about sexual orientation, including bisexual activists. But that has not been common yet in Persian-speaking community. Maybe in future we have to all move there, but we follow people and people follow the government restrictions. So we have to go wherever the government decide to take us.
I
Yes,
understand that. Just one quick thing. I'm sorry, Onur.
no worries.
I'm just wondering whether, for example, I have in my investigation, uh, I stumble upon Reddit. Uh, do you know Reddit, and does that maybe would be an interesting uh, platform for you to check on, or have you heard of it before?
I have heard of it, but I have never really used it, and I have not become curious about it yet because people have not moved there yet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I can totally understand that.
Yeah, actually from that I am curious, like from a personal level, which platform do you find as an activist most useful for you to express your activism? Like which would be the kind of first place for you to go? Where do you think it's more effective to be visible with bi plus activism?
Well, I think personally, I feel more safe in Twitter because, as I said, it's less based on visual content,
Hmm.
and also I have been able to create a network of support in Twitter. Although a lot of people say that Persian Twitter is a very hostile environment, but at the same time, it's an environment that you can mobilize people by a Twitter storm, by using hashtags, but also by calling your friends for help. And yeah, I think like I find it harder to communicate with people in Instagram because I don't fit in the uh, idea of how an activist should look like in Instagram. Like, for example, I have tried to have Instagram live with different activists, and people have always commented about my appearance. And yeah, I think in Twitter I have more time to think about what I want to write and then come back to it in my own time. And yeah, a lot of activists have left Twitter because they find it a hostile environment, but still, I'm more in love with Twitter compared with any other thing that I have tried. And more recently, people have become more interested in Clubhouse, which is also an interesting platform. But the idea of not being recorded make people curious and make people to have this motivation to try to follow any conversation there. But then at the same time, people live in different time zones. Iranian diaspora live in different time zones around the world, and it's harder to, yeah, to do your everyday life and follow the conversation in Clubhouse. And recently on Twitter, people also use this option of Twitter Space, which is kind of similar to Clubhouse. And people may feel safe there because these conversations are not supposed to be recorded. But then on the other hand, you never know who is recording them and who is listening to you. but also it gives you this feeling of you are really communicating with people because you hear them, and maybe it makes the environment less hostile because maybe it is easier for people to insult each other in a written conversation compared with a uh, verbal one, while a lot of other people are hearing you. But we have to wait and see how it will change the uh, dynamic in the social media platform in future.
Mhm. I also shortly experienced Clubhouse, which I found more participatory, involves some instant action, and it feels like a forum space in a digital platform. But obviously, it has its own also limitations. Then also the hate speech is there, all these issues that are kind of, let's say, translated from other platforms appear to be in. And as you say, Clubhouse, it's not supposed to be recorded, but we hear the stories of these recordings and all these things. So safety is not easy to, let's say, establish in those spaces.
Yeah, and it's really interesting for me that you feel like your personal preference is Twitter. As you said, a lot of activists have already left there and also find Clubhouse as just the reasons that you mentioned, it's more safe because of this kind of immediate exchange that you're hearing the person, and when you're talking to them, they might not want to insult you that harshly. That happens sometimes on Twitter. But also talking about your personal preference, I just want to reorient the topic a little bit towards you again and ask what has been the difference in the form of activism you were doing when you were in Iran compared to now that you are abroad? Because this has been a heated debate among us Iranian diaspora communities and also those inside Iran. And I would like to know your take on that and how real and significant is the divide you think between the inside outside of feminist and queer activism?
Well, in Iran, I started activism when I was not really involved in cyberspaces at all. Like in 2003, when I went to Tehran University, it was the time that people have started blogging, but I didn't have access to cyberspaces that much. And also, I was not that much interested in it because I was spending a lot of time in offline activism. But then I became more interested in online activism when I was suspended for a year from university, and that was supposed to be my final year of my bachelor. And then all of a sudden, I felt alone, and then I used cyberspace to connect with people that I already knew, and also to uh, get to know other people that I didn't have access to them geographically. And then I became more involved in feminist activism in Iran. And because of the security issue, we were trying to use cyberspace as a more safe space compared with discussions on telephone. And especially because at that time I was involved in 1 million signature campaign, which was a big campaign. A lot of people were involved in it, not only from different cities of Iran, but also from around the world. And it was really hard to make any decision because that campaign didn't have any structure. Like there was a formal structure and there was an informal structure, which was important at the same time, but there was not clear decision-making mechanism. And we had endless discussions face-to-face and also online about any issue. And then, yeah, uh, the Green Movement happened after the election, and again, it was hard to have access to other activists, to meet them, because we were not feeling safe, and there was a lot of pressure from the government. And then I moved abroad. And when I moved abroad, like I did it after a lot of other activities. So I was one of the last one in that wave of migration who took that decision. And staying in contact with each other was important for us because we were living in different parts of the world. And also staying in contact with people who are in Iran and trying to understand what they want and how they think was a really big issue for us. And more people started having access to online spaces in Iran, and started using technology in new ways, and following what happens in Iran on online spaces become easier for us. And also trying to we started to try to impact on Iran. Of course, it has started long time before that, but it has become easier because it was not something, internet was not anymore something that only a limited group of people have access to it. But nowadays, like a lot of people from different class, from different level of education, from different social backgrounds have access to online content, and that has become an important part of everyone's life. And for me, as a diasporic a scholar and activist, it is very important to understand what is happening in these cyberspaces, because that's my only chance of understanding and impacting on what is happening in Iran, and also among Iranians who live abroad.
That is super interesting. And I was wondering, now that you mentioned um, about yeah, Iranians abroad and all this, we noticed that you have a website that is called Spectrum. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Well, Spectrum is the name of our organization, and on the website of Spectrum, we only have limited information about our organization, but also link to different websites that we are running. So we have Macholand, which is a feminist website, and we have Dojenskera, which means bisexual in Persian, and that website is about sexual orientation and gender identity. And then we have Avishan, which is a sex education website, and we also have Iranian LGBT, which is again a website about so bisexual orientation and gender identity, but it has started with a focus on security on cyberspaces, on cyber hygiene, and also mental health issues. But now is more generally about LGBT issues and sexual orientation and gender identity again. And we also have Hamdam, which is a website for the app of Hamdam, and the app of Hamdam is a period tracker app. And the website and app provide information about health, health-related issues for people who may experience period in some period of their life. And then we have a more recent website, Ava for Kids, which is a website for sex education for children. and its focus is on educating children by using book stories. But we are going to provide information in that website for different group of children and teenagers, and also for adults who are in contact with them, so parents and educators. So all of these projects are focusing on different aspects of gender and sexuality, and all of them try to fill the gap in Persian-speaking communities by focusing on different aspects of gender and sexuality from a queer perspective. So when we provide when we provide sex education, for example, we provide it from a queer feminist point of view. So we try to make it inclusive for all the sexual orientation and gender identities. And the same when we talk about a feminist issue, we try to have the same approach.
That is, of course, really amazing to kind of promote awareness and try to raise awareness about sexual orientation and different sorts of identities, and on cyberspace and on Farsi social media platforms, which is very much needed. And I'm actually curious to know what have been the achievements or results of these educational platforms so far, and have you seen a lot of engagement with these platforms among Iranians inside or outside of the outside of Iran?
Well, some of these platforms have attracted more audiences compared with the other ones, and but the number of followers and visitors are not the only criteria to measure the impact. But I think what we have tried to do has been creating a new discourse, which is inclusive of everyone, and we have tried to change the way that people think about their gender and sexuality, and also the way that they perceive other people gender and sexuality. So we have tried to create a space for the most marginalized people to talk about their sexuality and their gender, and I think we have been successful in doing that in some levels. When, for example, we see that people have started using our concept, our narrative, our discourse in their discussion, uh, both in cyberspaces and outside it, in offline spaces. And when people engage in discussion with each other using those concepts, and when they email us or contact us and they say that these informations have been helpful to them, or they volunteer for doing something, they support us, they reshare us, they tell us how it has changed their life or the life of their loved ones. So those are the moments that we feel that we have made an impact on people's everyday life. But also we are aware that we are not the only groups that bring that change. Like a lot of people have other sources of information at the same time, and they may trust those sources of information more than us. For example, a lot of people that I interviewed for my Ph.D. told me that they don't generally trust information that they find in Persian. They try to use English-speaking sources. Even if their English is not good enough, they try to use even Google Translator to understand the text, but still they trust whatever they find in English more compared with a Persian source, and they still use English terminologies in a lot of situations. we have had these endless discussions about which translation is good for which terminology among the activists and scholars. But it seems that people are not interested in using those terminologies. They still use the English ones. For example, it was really interesting for me to hear that the Persian translation of some of the words related to sexual orientation and gender identities are considered too formal compared with the English equivalents of them, and people don't really use them. Yeah, but of course there are other groups of people who find these Persian terminologies helpful and they use them. But I mean, like people have different sources of information, and we have limited capacities, we have limited audiences, and there are mainstream media, mainstream content in different languages that impact on the way that people think about social issues more than the impact that we can have as a small number of activists with limited resources. But also those mainstream resources help us in the way that familiarize people with some concepts and make them to trust us. Like, for example, a lot of Iranians have learned about sexual orientation from Hollywood movies or TV series. And then when they hear about it from Persian speaking activists, they take it seriously because they have already been informed about it from other resources.
Thank you so much. Actually, like so many questions come to my mind, but I think one question that I have is that, I mean, now leaving the part of the website aside, you seem to be doing a lot of things. You do activism, you do research, so combining scholarly work with activism work and so many other things that you do, I just wonder, in terms of your mental health, time and energy, how do you manage it? I mean, I bow to you with all that you do. It's amazing. I mean, just tell us about that and what do you recommend to do?
So a common answer to this question in Persian is that hardly. But to be honest, I don't really consider myself a scholar. I use academic resources to inform myself as an activist and also try to produce academic knowledge to use it as an activist. But also part of my academic work is in Persian. I work with this social institute, Iran Academia, which is a organization which has a master program in social studies in Persian, and most of our students live in Iran, and most of our colleagues and lecturers live abroad, and many of them are the ones who were not allowed to teach in Iran, or when they were younger, they were not allowed to even study in Iran. And also a lot of our students are either students who don't have chance to study in Iran, or if they are allowed to study in Iran, they cannot focus on the projects that are interesting for them because of the censorship. So working with Iran Academia is a really great chance for me because a lot of our students have been involved in different social movements in different ways. And many of them know that they cannot really use their degree in Iran because it's recognizable everywhere around the world, but not in Iran. Some of them have used that master degree to apply and continue their studying abroad or work abroad, but most of them do it only for the sake of learning and growing. And many of them don't really end up at doing academic research or really becoming a researcher, but they learn to think critically, and that's really important. And that's a way for me and my colleagues to contribute in social change in Iran. Yeah, I think a lot of scholars around the world think about their academic work this way. They try to use the opportunity of teaching and researching uh, to empower people and to advocate for change. And yeah, it is hard to balance them, and it's also harder to be academically successful if you want to invest a lot of time and energy in activist work. But yeah, like some people have been successful in doing that. I don't think of myself that way. I don't have that expectations from myself. But yeah, I think my priority in my life has been always my activism.
That is amazing, and I think you're talking a little bit less of yourself because you're already an amazing scholar as well as an activist. So, and yeah, I appreciate the work that you do, and we all enjoyed a lot of what you said, and it's been an amazing evening so far. And I would just wanted to know if you want to add something more uh, right now.
Yeah, thank you. It has been a nice experience talking to you and going through all of those experiences that I have had in online spaces and to think about them again and to reflect upon them. But I just wanted to uh, yeah, say that I think it's really important to talk about cyberspaces because they are as real as offline spaces, and our online experiences shape our identity, our understanding of the world, our relationship with other people, and yeah, it is very important to take those experiences seriously and to try to understand them, and also to use these platforms for social change, and also to try to make those platforms safe and inclusive for everyone.
Thank you so much, Zainab, for joining us today. I mean, I personally learned so many things from you, and thank you so much for sharing all this knowledge and your story with us. And yes, we hope everybody who listened to this also enjoyed that. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to us today. We had a wonderful conversation with Zeynab Peyghambarzadeh on their Bi Plus activism and academic work on Bi Plus asylum seekers. And if you would like to follow TechnAct's previous and upcoming episodes, you can always find us on different platforms such as Apple Podcast, Spotify, and Google Podcast. And if you need more information about our wider research cluster, you can follow TechnAct on Facebook, to learn about our activities, other updates, and you can give us feedback. And our podcast and research cluster is located at the University of Gothenburg in Sweden. See you next time.